Hello everybody, this is GWS here. I get a lot of comments all the time telling me that I'm not, that I am a right winger, that I'm not a centrist, or that I'm not against the spectrum. Um, I consider myself a little bit of both actually. I am both kind of centrist in the balance of it, but I also don't believe in the political spectrum, and that's probably why on the spectrum I am a centrist. But a lot of people have problems with me not reporting on the right wing with my videos. And it is true. I don't make a lot of videos on right wingers. I do make some, and I encourage you guys who say that to go through my videos. You will find plenty of criticisms of right wingers, including inside of my ones of left wingers, because I'm always trying to be balanced and I always explain my complaints with the Republican Party. But there's a nature difference there. First of all, well, probably really the big thing is that I'm Republicans can be very obtuse. I should say probably most of them are obtuse to a certain degree. They don't understand nor do they want to understand issues with various groups of people. Um, they they are not sympathetic at times. I think that gets overplayed, but there is a little bit of a brush it off kind of thing when there are concerns when you don't give people security. It's I've always been a fan of the Reagan Democrats. Economic sense, but with a touch of empathy. And you do got to have a little bit of empathy, if nothing else, to provide security. Um, but right wingers, yeah, they're obtuse. They can be unsympathetic. They, warmongers. That's a big thing. That's a problem with them. Um, and they're just hypocrites. They talk about all this cut spending, deficit reduction, but it's like you look at what they propose, it's peanuts. You look at this healthcare bill, for example. You know, they've talked for years about getting rid of Obamacare, and what do they pass? What do they want to pass? Let's replace Obamacare with Obamacare Light, where we keep 60% of the stuff. Um, you know, yeah, we do the tax cuts, but then we keep all the regulations and 26 and pre-existing conditions, all that. I can make a whole separate video on the problems with Obamacare, the problems with all those things. But the point that I'm trying to make is they're pretty hypocritical. But here's the thing about Republicans, and this is a very big difference. And I guess it would help if I talked about generally my philosophy and personality. You know, I have about a couple hundred videos, but I don't, I'm not a natural person when it comes to communication. And so I talk about things when they're very, very important to me. I went probably 10 years without making a single video. Probably about 8 years, but you get my point. About 8 years not making a single video because it's just I had nothing to talk about. But um, Republicans, I'm not afraid are going to destroy this country. There are huge problems with Republicans, but I'm not afraid they're going to destroy the country. Left wingers, especially the far left, the Bernie wing, progressives, but even somewhat of the quote unquote moderate Democrats who are for all these social justice things and for limitations on free speech, wanting to outlaw hate speech. That's a big threat too. And so that's why you get the videos on left wingers. But I feel like I need to be more specific, so we're going to do this political spectrum one at a time. So we'll go ahead and start this. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I don't really like the wording of this question because, why can't you serve both? Why can't you have pro business and pro corporation? But if the two are in conflict, I'm a big Theodore Roosevelt fan, so I'll just say I slightly agree because I don't like the wording of the question and the dichotomy, but there's that. I'd always support my country whether it is right or wrong. No. You should support your country to a point, but well, the way I should put that is you should not strongly oppose your country because there is something to living in a country where you do want to have respect for it. So, just slightly disagree with that. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I don't really have much of an opinion. I guess my tendency is to slightly disagree with that because just because of what I said above, like, you know, you do need to have a bit of respect of where you're from, if nothing else. One race has many superior qualities compared to other races. Strongly disagree. I just feel like that's a big straw man question. But that's the answer to the question. So, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I slightly agree with that because ultimately it's about what you can get done. And if you have to get done with a little bit of a nefarious character, so long as you do not become nefarious yourself, then I guess I tend to agree with that a little bit. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. That is actually slightly true. Now, of course, like I said, I'm not going to strongly agree with that because you know, there are negative consequences to that, but there are times when the international community just does not get it, and you have to push forward anyhow. There's just the UN is overall weak pretty much, and it's with most things I'd say not, but the wording is sometimes, and I'd have to agree with that. There is a worrying infusion of information and entertainment, and yes, that is a big worry because especially with the 24-hour news cycle and all of that, the news is concerned with sensationalist stuff, and if there's a problem that's like a recurring problem over the decades, they don't report on it because according to them it's just like yesterday's news. It's not the big breaking story that they want to say they're bringing out there, and it's becoming even more problematic as they're losing viewers. So yes, that is a worrying fusion. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. um, Heavily divided by both. I'd say I tend to slightly agree with that because there is a humanity to all of us, and a lot of the classism does pose a problem, but nationalities is just different expressions of the same humanity. And you'll see in a lot of these that, I'm just not against multiculturalism, but we're going to move on. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. This is just a dumb question. Um, Ultimately, you want jobs, and that's the important thing. You can have a currency like the yen, which isn't worth the paper it's printed on, and you can still do fine as long as people are producing. And that's the big thing. If people are producing, that is the key. So I would have to say slightly disagree, but it's kind of a dumb question. You want to control both. You do want to have a strong dollar because that does encourage savings, but employment is the biggest thing. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. That is true. True to a point, I say, because right now regulations, they're too burdensome, way too burdensome. I'm talking about we have 80,000 pages of regulations. Maybe we should have 25,000, and that includes for the advanced technology. Because you look at what we had in the 1950s. If you look at the Federal Register, I wish I had it up here. I wish I had it bookmarked. I don't. But if you look at the Federal Register and you look through the 1930s through right up until 1970, you'll see we had very few regulations compared to today. After 1970, the regulatory burden spiked, and so did all of our economic problems. From each according to his ability, each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea? No. Because if you have that as a right, then you have the government deciding who is in need, who has the ability, and then, of course, when when you have the government dictating stuff like this, you're always going to get underground markets like exist in North Korea, where the government bureaucrats, there's the private market, there's the private currency, which goes to the people, and then there's what goes to the government, which secret counterfeit dollars. And then this is how Kim Jong Un becomes a fat ass who eats cheese all day. And because they're gonna anybody who's on the top, I'll just point this out real quick. Anybody who's on the top like this, whether it's huge multinational corporations, bureaucrats, collusion between them, or a combination, they're going to be the ones who enrich themselves. So if you think socialism, if you think this idea of a Marxist utopia is going to do anything, it's not. You're just changing the people in power. You're not giving people more power. You're not increasing the standards for workers. All you're doing is you're just empowering different people. It's a it's less than zero sum, because when you're talking about government, you got two different motivations here. Corporations, they're motivated by money and they gain power through money. So their whole thing is they have to get money. And yes, they can get some of it from the government, as they do, and that's where you get a lot of corruption. But a lot of it also has to come from the people. And since a corporation does not get its money through force, they have to coax people into giving money. And a lot of that is about lying, it's about cutting corners, producing cheap stuff, all that. But it's ultimately about the just getting money. With the government, it's by force. And the whole difference between it is with corporations, you got to have at least people with merit, people capable of, if nothing else, deception, but a certain competency in production, management, efficiency, all these things you hear about from the multinational corporations. With the government, because they get their power through force, all you have is elections to keep them in check. That's the whole thing about a democratic system. But here's the problem with the way the left is giving out money, is that they are, or power, I should say, they're giving power to unelected entities such as the EPA, FDA, the alphabet soup of bureaucratic agencies. These people aren't elected. They don't answer directly to the people. And so that's where you get problems. But anyhow, let's go on, because I don't want to be here all day. It's a sad reflection of our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I agree. It is a sad reflection in society. Again, it doesn't mean government should regulate it, but it's just a sad reflection on humanity that we're just so greedy. But yeah, land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Um, I've always debated that in my mind. It's just, because you have two regimes of land. You have the native, what a lot of Native American tribes, such as Cherokees, did, where land was a communal thing that was used and not owned. It was, management of that land was based on who was living on that land. And I just, there's a problem. It's not a problem that can be fixed, I don't think, in today's society, which surrounds land ownership. But there is, you know, when you have millions and millions of homes that are not owned or that are not being occupied, but that are owned, and then you have hundreds of thousands of homeless people, that's not okay with me. You know, there needs to be, you know, here's the way I view home, and I guess it's going off on a tangent a little bit, but here's the way I view homes. Like, if you're not occupying the home, if somebody renting from you is not occupying the home, you have no right to it. You know, and I think there are laws in some states where, squatters have actually gone to own their homes. It's really, really rare, and it takes the right judge for that to happen. But there are instances. But see, even in those states, they'll try cheap things like they'll say, well, we put a sign up in the yard, so that means we're using the home, we're occupying it. And no, occupation means humans living in the house in continuous occupation. Perhaps you would have to have some kind of policy. I don't know how you'd write it, but if you're gone for more than a year or something, then that house is free for anybody to take, and then whoever occupies that home first, gets it. Or you can have the government just, dirt cheap auction it off or something. There should not be this many unoccupied homes with this many homeless people. I do have a problem with that. It's regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I tend to disagree because you it does not matter, you know, people need to stop with this rich envy stuff. Like wondering how people got their money and, all that. It's really just meaningless bickering because when you do that, you take the attention away from the actual poor class. It's like if you live and you form your policy positions despite the rich, um, despite the poor, it's, you know, the bottom line is, are the poor's lives being improved? Like, okay, say, let's just say you have hypothetically a 50% improvement in the economy and the rich get 95%, the poor get 5% improvement. Um, is that better, or is a 0% improvement in the economy with nobody benefiting better than that? Because ultimately it's about whether the lives of everybody are improving. And that's the thing that people need to focus on. If you're rich, then good for you. Yeah, there needs to be, we need to make sure that our laws are not benefiting the speculators, and there at least need to be some minimum protection for at least the poorest people during speculation crashes such as what happened in 2008. And by that I mean, you have the FDIC, which is insures your bank accounts. That's a good thing. Because, okay, these banks want to go around doing stupid crap. Okay, but you're insured for that money. And then the government can go after those people um, who they had to insure for, and try to get that money back. But basically, we need to stop worrying about how rich the richest are. It's about how good the average people are doing and how much better they're doing. If we can have that kind of attitude, we will have a very positive business relationship, and you'll see small businesses grow too, because a lot of this hurts small businesses as well. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Yes, it is, because yeah, I'd even say I strongly agree, because the way I view it is, Our freedoms in this country should not be taken advantage of by other nations. You know, our standards should not be taken advantage of by other nations. Like it or not, like minimum wage, worker standard, pensions, all that, you know, they are our standard. And we should not let nations without these standards take advantage of us, take our jobs, take our workers, etc. There have to be protections, and sometimes that could come in the form of tariffs, but you can also do trade agreements and all that make it so you don't have to do a tariff, but where it's fair for all countries. Because it's one thing to have free markets in the U.S. It's another thing to have free markets in the It's another thing to have free markets in the rest of the world when trading with us. It's a completely different thing, and there's a lot of libertarians who are wrong on that point. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Generally, I agree with that because ultimately companies are about profit and they should be about maximizing profit. And if a particular company is able to make profit the wrong way, you change the policy, you don't change the company. Their whole thing is that the rich are too highly taxed. Yeah, yeah, just yeah. Okay. Those with the ability to pay should have higher standards of medical care. Again, it's problematic wording, but yeah, if you have money and you want to use that money for higher standards, you should be able to use that money. Now, whether it's ethical or moral, um, that's another question entirely. You know, of course, nobody should go without, but it's like, if you have money, then you should use it relatively as you please in a legal manner. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Generally agree with that because, you know, my regulatory philosophy is this, and it is that companies should be required to give information much more than actually providing something the way the government wants. Like, okay, so you got something like trans fats. Rather than banning trans fats, you just make them list the trans fats, MSG, you put regulations on these companies to be transparent about what they're putting in your food, in beverages, and any of the stuff that you use around the house. Information is the key here. And that's what you want the public to have so that they can make their own decision on whether to buy a product, or more importantly, probably, the retailers selling the product can have the information. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability for predatory multinationals to create monopolies. I very slightly agree with that because if you do get monopolies, it is better to break them up, and we do have precedent for that. It's one of the few things that is the least of the worst of worlds that the government has demonstrated. Now, I don't think the government's used this power enough, to be honest. There's so many places, and they wait to use it. Like AT&T, they could have gone after AT&T in the 1970s. They held the telecommunications industry back for so long because of their monopoly. They didn't have to innovate. They didn't have to, ultimately, when it comes to this kind of thing, yeah, you should break big companies up. Like, if they're so big that it would take decades otherwise for somebody to ever bring them down. The freer the market, the freer the people. Generally agree. Probably strongly agree, because it is true. A free market means a free people because corporations, while they can control money, they can't control you. Let's see. Abortion when a woman's life is not threatened should always be illegal. Um, Not always. Well, yeah. When a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. You know, I'm just gonna say agree because it's you know this is one of the things where conservatives don't get it fully right. I think because yes, the unborn do need to be protected. Abortion should be illegal, and even when the woman's life is threatened, every effort should be made to save that child and the mother. It should not be a priorities issue where you throw the baby in the trash. No, or you cut its head off, or whatever they do with you know somebody who's nearly come to term. It's you got to value. There's two lives, not one in there. That's Ron Paul's famous statement, and it's you should you should value both lives. That's basically what it boils down to. But there's more to it than that, though. There's the woman's life too, and in the case of rape, it's like that's no excuse to kill the child, but it's also no excuse to just leave the mother alone. You gotta help her out, and I'd even say, with some government assistance if need be, like that's traumatic, and when you're carrying a child like that, you know, it could be traumatic, and she needs every bit of help um, as she can get. So you do have to have some empathy there. It's not all about the child. And then you just do nothing for the mother. That's wrong-headed thinking, and honestly, conservatives just don't. They don't get that side right enough, and I think that's why they lose on this issue a lot. Is because they don't go through the complete picture. All authorities should be questioned. Generally agree because I do believe there needs to be some respect for authority, discipline. I'm not a personal libertarian. Personally, I probably even lean authoritarian. Just on not on a country level, but on a personal level. But yeah, you do need to question authority. You can't just be blind and not question authority. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth makes the whole world blind and toothless. No. No, that's not the best way to do it. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Damn right. The government has no business involved in the arts, music, any of that. That is cultural, that is personal, and all that. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Um, I can't agree with that. There may have been a time and place where you could do something like that, but in this society, you got to have at least a basic education. You are not going to survive on your own if you can't at least have the basics. So, in this society, I'll say, you have to have it compulsory. So I disagree with that statement. All people have their rights, but it is better for all sorts of people to stay to their own kind. No, that is, idea sharing is one of the best things, and this is the whole problem. It's not just this thing's probably referring more to races, but I take it as just like in general, like sharing ideas with each other is important. You don't want to avoid each other when you disagree. You want to be in each other's faces, hold each other accountable. Force people you disagree with to account for their positions. Why do you hold this position? What evidence are you basing it on? You know, Disagreement is when you should be the most confrontational. Not physically, but intellectually confrontational. You want to make people think about what they're supporting. And that's ultimately where humans can form consensus over what is right, what is wrong, why is it right, why is it wrong. If you're just in an echo chamber, you're never going to get that. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I agree. I agree. I'm sorry. There's studies on this, that try to say spanking doesn't, help. But I'll say this: people who were spanked as children feel like it helped them, and that's also shown in survey studies polls. You know, they feel, good for having gone through that. And when you have the respect of your parents, there is no higher order of respect. It's not just for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I guess I don't even know what this question means. Like, what's it trying to imply? you know, like, is it implying keeping secrets are good or bad, or I don't get it. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Yeah, yeah. Marijuana is alcohol's more dangerous than marijuana. Cigarettes more dangerous than marijuana, publicly and privately. It's just yeah, there are negative effects to marijuana, and I think people really downplay a lot. Like they try to act like smoking marijuana is not harmful at all. No, it is harmful, and there's been studies that prove it. The whole thing is it's just not as harmful as a lot of the other things. You eat too many cheeseburgers, it's harmful. So it's like it should be legalized, not taxed, not regulated, just legal. Marijuana should be just as legal as lettuce you buy from produce. There is nothing wrong with it. The only thing I would say is maybe like if you live in a wild area, because there are studies that show that marijuana does hurt some wildlife populations. Um, because in particular, it makes it easier for predators to wipe out entire populations. Because I guess the the herbivores, they eat the marijuana, they get high, and then they can't run from the predators. Something along those lines. But you can have little limited regulations in specific locales like that. But if you're talking about like growing it in the house or something, no, there should be no limits. There should be no caps. You know, yeah, just legalize it. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Exactly, mostly. I'm not going to say I strongly agree, but it's very close to strong because teaching job skills is important because okay, yeah, you're going to teach people the nuances of quantum mechanics and you know multivariable calculus and all that stuff, but it's ultimately what's going to get these people into the job market to be successful. A lot of the skills that are taught just a lot of things that are taught just aren't applicable to a lot of the jobs people are actually going to be getting. you know and a lot of this is the education lobbyists. The university lobby pushes for liberal arts education at the expense of technical vocational education. Vocational education is looked down at on our schools way too much, and quite frankly, it's the most important form of education because it is a functional education. Yes, it is a specialty, and you're not always going to find jobs as a specialist. Um, but if you look at the number of generalists out there, people who try to go to these colleges so that they can get any job they want, there's a little bit of merit to it, but ultimately the market is oversaturated, and you see it in the numbers. More college graduates get less middle class. What does that mean? It means there's more people going for jobs that are not in demand. And in fact, there was one report. I don't know what newspaper it was from, but that when Trump met with business owners and Trump asked what the biggest hampering was to them providing more jobs, and they said a lot of people just aren't qualified to do the jobs. And it's not because of lack of education, because We're more educated now than we've ever been in history. That's not the problem. Problem is they're not learning job skills, and that needs to change. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be able to reproduce. No, no, because if you start dictating who does and does not get to reproduce, you could end up in a very dangerous place. So no. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I kind of agree with that because as children, you do need discipline first and foremost. You know, like that doesn't mean, you just, live your childhood like you're in a barrack. Your childhood years should be the most fun years of your life, but if you don't learn to respect authority as a child, you're going to struggle in life. And you see that a lot with people who are just in and out of jail, in and out of prison, always committing crimes, have disregard for the law, go, you know, act on their impulses. You have to have discipline. And that needs to be taught from childhood. There are no savage and civilized peoples, there are only different cultures. Generally agree. There's a few exceptions, but different cultures are good. And this is where I break from the alt right and a lot of right wingers in general, is that, especially Ann Coulter, who I think really gets this wrong, is, you know, Western civilization is good. It's done a lot of good things, but, we're not the angels on this planet that people claim we are. We've done a lot of our own wrong, you know, in our own right. We've done a lot of wrong. And to say that we are the angels that descended upon the world to spread our blessed values on it, no. All cultures have different beautiful parts, strengths, weaknesses, and just differences. And the more perspectives you have, the better. And that's what these cultures bring. You know, different, just differences. Just differences in customs, music, all of that. And I embrace that. You know, we are a melting pot of many different cultures, and that is a wonderful thing. Now, there's going to be questions related to assimilation later, so I'll get to that when that happens, but there does need to be some assimilation. But the fact is, multiculturalism is a good thing, it's not a bad thing. And Western civilization is not this beautiful thing. Okay. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I don't know. I think I've taken this test a few times, and it's just, I think I teeter totter between agree and disagree, because it's just, um, here I'm gonna disagree, but it's like there's really kind of a weak argument for both sides. I'm generally under the impression that even if you do nothing but waste away, waste away your life, it does not mean, like, you should at least have a minimum standard of living, is what I'm trying to say. Bare minimum. And by bare minimum, I mean basic roof over your head, even if it's just one room. Um, you know, no furniture, one room, food in your belly, and water. Those are your three. And of course, some sanitation. Like have a bathroom. But it's, you know, like have the basic necessities, but it's just, you can't leave anybody out in the cold. I don't care how much they act like they deserve it, how little they do. You you got to give people a minimum standard. But yeah, there is an argument that says, if people aren't willing to do for themselves, why should you do for them? You can live homeless as well, and there is an argument to that. But in general, I lean slightly on the side of empathetic when it comes to that. When you're troubled, it's better not to think about them. It is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I'd like to say I'm a great person. I don't know what this has to do with anything in the spectrum, but um, you know, I try to focus on the positive, I guess. And yeah, I do hold stuff in that I probably shouldn't, but yeah, personal stuff. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated in a new country, probably right. Yeah, it's just a fact. If you're an immigrant, you're just going to be an immigrant. You're not going to, when you learn, you know, say you come here from like Spain or something, and like all you know is Spanish, you know, you're never going to be fully integrated. You can understand somewhat of the customs and all that, but ultimately, you're always going to have the accent because, you know, you're always going to have the accent, and you're always going to have your customs that you learned as a child because that's your impressionable years. And if you spent your entire childhood in Spain and you moved to the US as an adult for like a job, even if you stay there for the rest of your life, you're never going to be fully integrated. And that's not necessarily a horrible thing, but it's a reality and people need to recognize that. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us, and it usually is, at least in an economic sense. And I guess that's what this would have to be talking about because how do you provide corporations with healthcare and all that? But generally speaking, the things that affect positively impact corporations also positively impact everybody else. Perhaps not proportionally. More is going to go to the corporations, but with capitalism, you get everybody benefits to some degree. Even if the poor only get minor benefits, it's a benefit. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Agree. There should be no, and I say that about NPR, PBS, just like what Mitt Romney said, Big Bird, sorry, but you gotta go. You know, I don't believe in funding of any private corporations, to be honest, and there's a lot more than um, just the news networks that I believe that with. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Exactly. That's just the truth. You know, there's a little bit of a merit to counterterrorism, but the fact that, the NSA doesn't need to be doing all this. You know, millions and millions of phone records and what, not a single terrorist caught. You know, it's just. And then you have records of all the metadata, all the call times, all that. And yeah, you can make deductions from the metadata, even if it's not actual conversations and recordings. A significant advantage of a one-party state is it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. And no, because that's not an advantage. Not an advantage in the least. Because, um, and the thing is, it's like, liberals are probably disagreeing to this too. But I don't think they realize that their policy positions actually agree with this point. Because, again, like I said before, where does all the power they want go to? EPA, FDA, all these agencies who are not elected. And when they when they justify it, what do they say? A liberal's always going to tell you Congress can't get it done because Congress is corrupt and they're bought by the big banks. What are you saying? These are our democratically elected officials by our democracy. So when you say you don't trust or when you say you trust bureaucrats more than you trust Congress, what are you saying? You don't trust democracy to get the job done. So, you liberals who are click and disagree, stop. You agree with that point. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. No. No. Just no. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I used to be weakly for the death penalty. Now I'm weakly against it because just of all the botches, it's just they try to come up with their own chemical cocktails, and it's just botching so many executions. And we don't know what kind of torture that's causing. It could be causing extreme torture. We don't know. So it's just I just think if we can't do the death penalty in a humane manner, we just need to stop it. I'd honestly be for bringing back the firing squad because at least with that you get near certainty. You'd get a lot fewer botches, I'm sure, with a firing squad than you would with lethal injection. But um, you know, the way we're doing it now, we might as well just get rid of the death penalty. We're keeping them in death row too long anyhow. It's expensive to keep people on death row. It doesn't do anything. Like you sentence somebody to death, and they're unless you're in Texas where they do it right, you know, executing 300 people per year. They don't screw around with that. That's unless you're in Texas or something. I'd say just get rid of it. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and below to be commanded. It's just the way humanity works. It doesn't mean it's a good thing, but humans operate in a hierarchy. That's their natural order. That's just how we are. For better or worse, that's humans. And to try to eliminate that hierarchy, not only are you going to fail, but you're going to create a more extreme, ramped up hierarchy where it's going to be less about the merits of the people and more about lineage, all that. Abstract art does not represent anything that shouldn't be considered art at all. Double negative. So I guess it should be considered art. Doesn't represent anything. Oh, I added to that there. I'm an idiot. It's my eyes. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. I agree. Abstract art is crap. And I say that literally because they have literally posted crap as abstract art. It's horrible. And criminal justice punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Disagree. Rehabilitation. There needs to be some punishment, so I'm not all out strongly disagree, but ultimately, the question you should be asking when you lock somebody up is what amount of time is appropriate to rehabilitate this person? Can they be rehabilitated? And if they can, how do we go about it? There does need to be a punishment element. Life does need to be worse in a prison than outside of a prison. You know, here's the thing, and this is why a lot of people, they just go in and out of jail, is because life in jail, a lot of them believe, is better than life out in the streets. And for a lot of them, it's probably true. Because when you're in jail, when you're in prison, yeah, you get your ass kicked a lot, but you have a lot of protection too. When you're on the streets, you have no protection. Somebody can bust in, blow your head off, and then, okay, they're going to prison, so what? Since they're going to be protected and they just killed one of their rivals, they get the best of both worlds. That's why you see people doing this. So it's like, on one hand, you have to improve the qualities on the streets, but another thing, you can't make prison just be like some kind of, you know, regular house, regular home you live in, where you're just locked up from society. It does have to have some negative reinforcement where, it's like you don't want to go back there. So people talking about putting condoms, keeping it air conditioned to a comfortable temperature, all that. It's just, no, you got to have some negative reinforcement, but yes, the focus should be on rehabilitation and not just punishment. It is a waste of time to rehabilitate some criminals, and with this, I agree. There are some people who are, in and out, you just can't rehabilitate them. And I'd say for these people, you actually have their sentences increased. Just give them, you know, some kind of indefinite sentence, maybe with the possibility of parole if they demonstrate with reasonable certainty that they can function in the real world. But yeah, generally it's like, there comes a point where rehabilitation just doesn't work, and you just have to lock somebody up until they decide they want to rehabilitate, or just keep them locked up for the rest of their lives and just, give them basic visitation, all that, but don't let them out in society. The business person and the manufacturer are more different than the writer and the artist. That is definitely true. 100% true, because people who produce things are what allow the writer and the artist to exist. Like, before writers and artists, there were people who produced. And it's like I said, like, when you look at society was built around the farmer. It started around the farmer. Like, you get Egyptians, Sumerians, same story. The Nile, the Euphrates, the Tigris. It's, Yellow River, Yangtze, all these agricultural areas in early humanity were what allowed these huge cities to form, and where, you know you get you produce a surplus, you request services such as art and music, and that is the whole thing. And it's, you know yeah, you have art before you had all that. You had like cave paintings and all that, but yeah, art is a manifestation of the human brain. It does not cause the brain to work. It is a sign that the brain is working. And I think that's the key. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I take this to be a question about gender roles more than anything, and that's how I'm going to answer it. I'd say I weakly agree, because it's not an absolute solid thing, but gender roles are natural. Just men are just by God, and even if you're an atheist, by evolution, designed for certain roles and duties. And when you stay to that natural order, generally it's a good thing. When you don't fight the natural, actually, that's the way I should put it. When you don't fight that natural order, it's a good thing. Now, granted, there are going to be women who are high T women, there are going to be men who are low T men, and they are going to fit perhaps the opposite roles, and you have to respect that too. That is not a bad thing. That is also natural. You just have variation within people. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. No, because if you look at where those countries were before our companies started going there, or before, just large companies in general started going to these countries, you look at where these countries were, it was horrible. They were starving to death like mad. Yeah, they're still poor. They're still working very, very hard for making little, probably too hard, probably making too little. But you look at where they were now compared to where they were before, it's just people are going to do what they need to survive. And if they feel like those jobs are an improvement over what they had, they're going to take them. And as they take them, the natural thing to happen is they're gonna demand more eventually, and you know their standards are going to improve. That's just reality. I mean, we were talking about blood diamonds like just 10 years ago. Blood diamonds, enslavement, civil wars everywhere. Now you got countries like Nigeria who embrace they mostly stopped their civil wars. They still have pockets, but they're relatively peaceful now compared to where they were before, and they're a wealthy country now. They're top 15 in the world, I think. Most, they took over South Africa as the most wealthy country in Africa. Who would have thought that 20 years ago? It's amazing. So, I mean, it's like I said, the people aren't where they need to be, but they're better than where they were, and a lot of that is because they are embracing free markets, they're embracing peacefulness and productivity, and that is really important. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. And with that, I generally agree. It doesn't mean you don't be feisty, but you gotta accept how things are and learn to navigate within that. That's just how life is. It doesn't mean you don't try to change anything, but the first thing you have to do is understand how things are, learn to navigate through it, and learn at least where you can take the sledgehammer to the whole system and say screw it. But ultimately, you have to make peace with it first. You have to learn how to navigate it, and then you take your sledgehammer, and then you go nuts. Okay, astrology accurately, disagree. No need to go into that. Everybody agrees it's crap. You cannot be moral without being religious. I tend to agree with that generally because all morality is based on religion. God's providing a morality to the masses. It's just a fact. Like atheists, they coattail on morality. They could be moral people, but what morality are they following? What ethos are they following? It's all based on those who love God, and that's the important thing. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the generally disadvantaged. I agree, because if you look at what churches, what groups do for people and all that, it's not even close. There's just so much more provided by them. It's like you look at the number of hours that somebody works for what little Social Security they get, what little entitlements they get at the end of their lives. Charity is definitely more efficient. Some people are naturally unlucky. I don't really believe in luck that much, to be honest. It is important that my child's school instills religious values, and values is the key. It doesn't mean you preach religion, but yes, you take values from the Bible because it is an extremely important compilation that gives those values. And it is based on the moral code that we live in today, so it is, yeah, absolutely schools should instill religious values. Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. I agree because sex, you know, it can wreak havoc on people's minds, on their mental health, all that. A same a same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Slightly agree. The traditional family is the best, but if there is, if there's stability and there's not like, you're not pushing the child to have the same kind of relationship and you're not doing any of that, then I think it's perfectly fine. If the child can be a child and you can have the same kind of discipline, the same kind of mother-father relationships, all that, it's just, you know, as long as you're not encouraging the sexual aspects of it, yeah, I don't mind it. Yeah, homosexuality is a sin, but it's humans do just as bad of things. It's not just homosexuality above everything else. No. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Yes. Yes, yeah. What goes on in the private bedroom between consenting adults is no one business of the state. Also, yes. No one can feel true naturally homosexual. Yeah, I agree. I don't believe people are born homosexual. You could be born low T male, high T female, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be a homosexual. They talk about orientation at birth, all that. And yeah, that could have an impact on your hormonal balance, but it does not mean you are naturally gay. Homosexuality is not born. It's not a choice per se, but it is based on choices that you make in life, maybe during your early life, um, maybe choices that parents made, all that. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Agree. Now let's see where I stand. And this is usually varied for me a little bit. See, I'm a little bit more right wing than I was before, but usually I fall within +2, -2 of the right libertarian. So it's about where I've been. I was a little bit more center last time I tested. Because there's thing, like, instead of strongly agreeing with something, I may agree with something, all that. But you know, here's the point I want to make is, yeah, okay, if you want to say I'm center right, yeah, center right. But I don't believe in the spectrum, and I do believe in many right left wing ideas. There's a lot here that wasn't listed. Like, I believe in a universal basic income. If they would have asked that, I would have said I generally agree with that idea. There's a lot of left wing ideas I agree with. So it's not just me being a right winger because I just make videos against left wingers. I generally have a lot of feelings toward negative feelings toward right wingers and some positive feelings toward maybe not left wing people, but ideas. And ultimately, that's where it's ultimately meaningful. Is there other? No, there's nothing else. Okay. Well, that's the political compass, and that's more proof that yes, I am a centrist. You guys saw the questions there. Thanks for listening, guys. God bless.